Welcome to our this week's webinar. Thank you, Anand, for being a part of this. Anand is
Happy to be here.
principal and a partner with Studio Motley in Bangalore, before which he did work with Nagaraj Vastari and then with 100 Hands, and also his masters, I think, in the US. And back and partnering with his wife, Studio Motley, and looking forward to listening to his experience of working on practice. And his title of the topic is Negotiating Shelter. So we were talking about who influenced you in your journey as an architect, Anand.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a tough one to answer because it's not confined to just the people we meet. We have the professors who taught us to the places that I've worked in have all had a big influence on me, but it's also the people we read about and whose works we visit. And in the 90s, we would, if you remember, Chetan, we'd go sometimes in the middle of the night. If we say an interesting house, we'd just barge in and say, you know what, we're architecture students. Can we please see the house? And so all of those things matter a lot. So
Right.
it's hard to pinpoint saying these are our heroes in that sense. But I would definitely like to mention the people who I've had the good fortune to work with. I think they've had a big hand in the way we practice today.
Great.
Right.
Over to you, Anand, for you to take us on your journey.
Sure. Thanks, Chetan. So, first of all, of course, thanks for having me over. So, we'd like to, just start off by just explaining why we call our presentation Negotiating Shelter, because I think these two words kind of encapsulates our practice in a very fundamental and kind of a basic way. Architecture for us is, and I particularly like this definition of shelter, where it says it's a foundation from which to develop higher human motivations. And a lot of that, what we do, isn't in isolation. In the sense, we don't see ourselves as the author of our work, or as the sole author of our work. It's a process of dialogue. It's a process of negotiating with various forces. With not just the people. And with people, I mean, you have the clients, you have contractors, we have our craftsmen. But it's also about negotiating with our context, in the sense it could either be the city or the land or the geography, culture, etc. And for us, it's always a question of finding some way to bring all of this together in as simple a way as possible. We negotiating with clients, of course, is always somehow, for architects, is taken on a negative view of sorts. But we try and not approach it that way. Though, of course, I'm not saying we don't have our moments of frustration. But I think a lot of good things come about with these discussions. So Renzo Piano has a wonderful word for, instead of negotiate. So he uses contamination. So he says architecture is all about contamination, and then he goes on to explain that he uses the word contamination in the best possible way. And he says, it's all of these inputs that come in from all these various factors that actually elevate a work of architecture, and that's what really adds meaning. Now, I'd like to, of course, add here that we're not big fans of thinking of we don't believe that design happens through public referendum. We don't believe that either. We do believe that architect, through his training and through his experience, is an expert, but we feel that far too often the idea of authorship gets in the way of good common sense architecture. So to quickly just run you through a couple of projects, in a sense, it just gives an example of what we value in architecture. And this first one is a project by Scissor, of course, is one of his earlier projects, and it's a tea house. And what I particularly like about this slide is, one is, of course, his project itself, which seems to hug every contour, respond to every little small nuance of the site. And right next to it, you have that other building which is completely aloof and doesn't even look to face the sea, which is as simple a gesture as that. So there's a very nice contrast, and it's nice to see this. The other project, and we would all idolize, and is one of my favorite projects of Richard Myers, is the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. And I'd always seen these images, these pristine, fantastic forms, this beautiful detailing. And I had a chance to visit this when I was in Atlanta. And it was a shock for me to discover that this is actually in downtown Atlanta, in a very bustling, very commercial, retail, vibrant kind of a hub. And I had no idea, because when you see the photographs, it's very much the modernist idiom of an object in a park. So what was interesting for us is Renzo Piano had been asked to do an addition to this museum, and if you see the plan of it, you can see that this is Richard Myers Museum, and these are those downtown Atlanta streets which are quite full, a lot of life on those streets. And Renzo Piano makes a very subdued kind of a statement, a very understated kind of a building. But what he does is he hugs the edges of the site, and he builds all along this. And what now happens is it's lovely to walk down that street again, where earlier it felt like a hole in the urban fabric, and now suddenly it feels protected, it feels safe, and it feels like that particular building now responds to the site. So these are the things we value. We really value the idea of a background kind of an architecture which doesn't speak too loudly, but responds to the context. And we always like to think of our works as plugins, either in nature or in an urban context. So very quickly, we'll just go through 6 of our projects, which have about 4 houses and 1 market. We'll start with the Madiwala market. We had this opportunity. We were called by the BBMP to work on a completely new scheme for the Madiwala market. Those of you in Bangalore may be familiar with this space. It's an unusual site in the sense it's 800 meters long and it's fairly narrow. And of course, it's in this amazing place where there's so many things happening. It's a highway. It's a junction of a highway. There are some institutes. There is a mall. And the market itself, there's a whole lot of traffic issues. There's a police station nearby with their issues as well. So it was a complex kind of a situation, and the idea of a market itself, the idea of a modern Indian market, and how we should deal with it. So this is the site we have, and this is about 800 meters long, but it's not uninterrupted. In between are access ways to various developments behind the market. And this is the main Sarjapur Road and Hosur Road junction that we have. So, when we saw the site, BBMP had told us that they already had an existing plan drawn out by an engineer. And they had negotiated with the current occupants of the marketplace, and we had to accommodate X number of shops. 440 shops is what was given to us. And in the plan that they had managed to incorporate exactly 440. So that was one of the briefs. So we started off with that, and we tried to see what we can do with it. And our basic idea, seeing how linear the site was, that we should try and break it up into several nodes. So we have our very basic idea of movement and pause. And that's how we developed it. And the other idea was that it should just remain a marketplace, that such a huge market with so many people potentially coming into this, it could also become a social hub of sorts for that region. And we thought, what are the other functions that can go with this market? And we added a canteen, we added a creche, an ATM. We managed to carve out parks, offices, etc. So we tried to make it as much a vibrant hub as we could possibly do. So of course, a large market is a complex thing in the sense there are so many stakeholders. And one of our primary aims was to negotiate with all of them and get all of them, systems for all of them in place. So we start off with our circulation. We have our circulation to various places behind the market. We identified certain key places within this linear arrangement so that these could behave as community nodes. And because it was so linear, we also thought that there should be multiple entry and exit points so that nobody feels kind of claustrophobic within this or feel like they have to travel a long distance to either get in or get out. We worked parking, of course, for such a huge market was crucial, and we identified various pockets of where two-wheeler and four-wheeler car parking could be managed. Though, of course, on that street we weren't able to, completely incorporate the parking that would be required. So what we did do was we identified there are some police grounds opposite which are largely empty with just a few scattered buildings there. And our proposal was that we should do a multi-level car park on that side and have a foot over bridge connecting it to the market, to the center of the market in that sense. Uh, I spoke about systems that are required in the market, and we thought, loading and unloading bays potentially, as of now, leads to a lot of issues because the vehicles stop wherever they like, and there aren't designated spaces. So we created those. We worked with the Many Group for this. They were very kind enough to offer their expertise. So we had this whole entire system of what kind of vehicles would drop off the goods from that point to a collection point, from the collection point into each shop individually. We thought that right now the autos and other goods vehicles get into the market straight away, and we wanted to keep it completely pedestrian. So we used the Many Group's dedicated vehicles for this, and made sure that the pedestrian traffic doesn't get interrupted, nor does the vehicular traffic on this road. Garbage, of course, is a massive thing to look at. So we identified the kind of garbage we create. We had collection points, storage points, and a small treatment place right at the end, based on the kind of garbage, and that whichever we were unable to treat at that point, we would take away and have it treated elsewhere. And all this was planned with garbage experts. We identified parks, children play areas, landscape zones, and restaurants all within this market so that it becomes a lively space, and you would enjoy spending time here and not just as a place where you would buy something and leave immediately. Restrooms also we designed in as thoughtful a way as possible, in the sense, it's kind of natural that any public toilet, if you're walking past it, you're trying to hurry up, you increase your speed, and we didn't want that to happen. So we've designed it in a way that you walk past it, and unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. It doesn't ventilate into the pedestrian zone at all. And of course, drainage and services, etc. We paid a lot of attention to these things so that all of these things are taken care of and happen in a seamless way. So this is a small snapshot of one of the areas where we have a lot of public functions, like your canteen and offices, etc. So what was originally drawn up as 440 shops, as just 440 shops and nothing else, and we were able to carve out all these extra spaces mostly by responding to the site edges. And because the site that was given to us actually narrows and expands at certain points, we were able to take advantage of that. And in the extra areas, we were able to carve out all these park areas and children areas, etc. So in terms of a section, the other thing that we felt is, again, because of its linear kind of a format, we wanted to make sure that it doesn't smell. There is good air circulation. So in terms of a section, it became a very simple arrangement of a central pedestrian walkway, which is really the heart of the pedestrian experience, with shops on either sides. But what we did do was elevate the roof so that this becomes kind of a grand concourse for the pedestrian, made sure that there is plenty of cross ventilation at both at the lower level and at the higher level. And the other thing we did was we made sure that if you all have seen the site, there are these fantastic rain trees along this site, and we thought that we should open up the roof in some areas so that we still experience those rain trees and we feel like we're walking under those trees. In terms of form, we weren't sure, who's going to build this. So we were very, very low key in terms of form exploration. We kept it as simple as possible so that anybody could build it. But we just made sure all these systems are in place, and we introduced these materials like your clay block jalis, so that there is good amount of cross ventilation, and also adds color and texture to the entire scheme. Some of the public areas, we inverted the roof so that it becomes a little more public, and when you look at it, it's marked out as public areas, as functions other than the market. So this would be that grand kind of a pedestrian walkway, and we have this fairly large 4 meter skylight through the middle, through which you can see you can see those wonderful rain trees. So the eventual idea was that all these walls, it becomes in elevation, it becomes a very simple expression of structure onto the facade. And the idea was all these blank walls would get covered by the local artists, so they become really vibrant in that sense as well. So we'll move on to one of our first houses that we did in our practice, and it was a fairly large plot. It was about 13,000 square feet, and it was built as a weekend house, um, so mostly for entertainment and as a refuge from urban life, kind of a thing. So what we did here was, the idea was that how do we connect the house to the large site outside? So the very basic idea we had here was to create a large, what we call an open room, and that becomes a center. It's an open courtyard with a kund in between, and the rest of the house looks into that kund and is connected to that kund. So the other thing we had is, because this was also meant almost exclusively for hosting parties, we had various options from this courtyard to the larger half of the site, which was unbuilt, and we had terraces at various levels which can be accessed from outside. So in a sense, becomes a party loop when all of these can be seen, visually seen, and physically accessed from the outside. So the plan resolves itself into a kind of a public kind of an area, which is your living room, which we kind of dramatized and made it a little more elaborate with water surrounding it, and the rest of the house with the bedrooms and kitchens, etc. So this is so this is that living room that I was talking about, which is surrounded by water. It just becomes the living room becomes a 15 feet high kind of a glass volume that's floating on this glass, and that it also helps in cooling the entire house, and you almost never need to switch on the air conditioning. In terms of materials, we've kept it really simple. There's stone, there's brick, and there's concrete with a wooden glass for the windows. The kund in between, when we visited back after a couple of years, we were really happy to see that the kund gets used as much as any other room in the house, and the residents have completely covered it up with greenery. In a sense, the greenery is really taking over the house. We had our good friend Murli make this lovely swing for us with wood and brass. So the idea is really simple. How do you enjoy the large site? And you should be able to enjoy that whether you're inside the house or outside the house. This was a very different kind of a project, though this was also a house for entertaining, but this was on a much larger scale, and it was also on the outskirts of Bangalore, with almost on a 2.5 acre site. So in that sense, didn't have any context in terms of the city. So how do you place a relatively smaller block on a large 2.5 acre site? So we did several options, 30 options, 40, maybe even more, on how exactly we should place this smaller block on this large site. And we finally came to this as a site plan, saying this, even though it's a smaller block, this is what would control the site, or where we would be able to enjoy the site the most in terms of a site plan. So for us, this was as much a landscape project as it is an architecture project. And for us, landscape starts with where we build on that particular site. And that's paramount for us. That's the first question we ask ourselves, where should we build? So the plan resolves itself into a very simple L-shaped configuration with the site. It really didn't have any prominent physical features or any even existing tree cover, but it was but what we did do was we have this L-shaped configuration with a large veranda that kind of binds it all together. So for us, this veranda really is the heart of the house, and that veranda extends into a kind of a glass living room, and that on a good day we could open up the doors and both the veranda and the living room would be undivided. So in terms of a structure, it's an extremely simple structure. It's almost 80% steel structure, and it's a simple truss, and that truss is expressed onto the facade. So these are some of the models. Of course, we made many models, but this was the final one. So the linear arrangement of spaces in plan has the house acting as a separator between a more public forecourt and a more private lawns behind. The private lawns behind are of course the large lawns which can be used for parties, etc. And we think of that veranda as a hyphenation between these two. The other thing the house itself, of course, separates the more public to private areas, and it's also expressed through this stone wall that goes through the house and divides these public and private areas. The materials chosen were all natural and local, creating warmth and texture. The predominantly steel structural framework are takes on local timber, stone we use in various finishes in both textured and polished. We wanted to use a country tile roof on this, and our masonry walls we intended to use with a kind of a pigmented lime plaster. So the structure itself is inspired by a Japanese torii gate, and it spans the entire cross section of the house. The same section goes through and through. So what we achieved with this, and because of the veranda, is that even though it's a house that's designed to accommodate up to 150 people at a time, it also retains that intimacy. And if it's only a family weekend together, they shouldn't be overawed by the scale. This is that stone wall that I was talking about that kind of separates the public to the more private areas. That's the living room. That's the entry. So in terms of an entry, you have no idea of the size of the lawns after you cross this. But once you enter, you're into the living room, and those entire living room areas can open up into those huge lawns behind. These are some of the renders. These are from the private lawns. You're able to see the large veranda that kind of spills into the living space. This would be your entry view from the street. This again is a completely different kind of a situation, in the sense it's a very urban house. It's in the middle of the city, but it's a large plot, and it's not a weekend home. It's a house they very much want to live in. And in fact, one of the first things the client told us was that this is the last house he'll ever build, and this is it for him, and this is the house he wants to settle down into. So on a largish plot, it's about 6,500 square feet. Where should we build again? And the idea again came into a very simple, hugging the edges of the site so that we create a large public kind of an area, a garden kind of an area here, and we carve out a living dining areas into this within this dotted line, and that becomes the expression of the house. In the sense, there's a huge cantilevered exposed concrete roof hovering over the entire thing. So this is how our plans kind of fleshed out and turned out to be. These are these huge lawns that we have with a huge sit out. And this entire living dining area will eventually be covered by glass, so that when you're sitting here or in your dining or in the living, the actual room dimensions would be this, because everything else is glass and you enjoy the entire dimension of that site. So also the other kind of a requirement for this was that there should be a kind of a centrality to this house, in the sense all these areas should look into the central area, and that's what we managed to achieve through this, and the connection from this to the outside. So in terms of a form, this was a definitely a roof dominated kind of an aesthetic because of the exposed concrete roof, um, which cantilever out almost 3 meters from that. We initially had thought of using some metal cladding for this, but we're not sure if that will go ahead. It's in construction and we're still thinking about those things. So this is that huge lawn that we were talking about, and that's the entire living dining area. Some in construction pics. We've used a fair bit of concrete in this in its exposed form. We've used it both as board formed concrete and in panel form, 4 feet by 8 feet. So we also try to look at light modulation in our own way, where the bedrooms get a smaller quantity of light, and the public areas get a larger quantity of light. This is an image of that living area. It's a double height living area with the large roof kind of sitting on these little slim metal props all around. And this dramatic roof doesn't touch the body of the building in any point and is just delicately kind of poised over it. This is looking into the living area from the upper floor. So I don't know why people keep coming back to us for farmhouses. So this is another farmhouse that we were doing. But again, in terms of a client brief and both in terms of who the clients are, this was completely different for us. And this was a farmhouse in the true sense of the word, in the sense they actually wanted to farm vegetables here and even keep a couple of cows here as well. And it's a much smaller scale than what we had done earlier. So again, this was a large plot. This was about 1.5 acres. And again, one of the first things we started is where to build and how to build. And our very initial first sketch that we did was these two linear blocks that were in a sense sliding past each other. So the idea of it sliding past each other was that we had these opportunities to create these semi-sheltered deck kind of areas, and that we would slip and we would enter and slip into this in the middle zone. We spoke about negotiations in the beginning, and one of the things that happened with this client is, while this was our initial arrangement, through various discussions and various reasons, some which were completely non-architectural, we really had to push this right towards the corner of the site. And what that happened was that we got this courtyard, kind of a stone courtyard, as a bonus, which wasn't there earlier. So this is what the plan was eventually it turned out to be. So we have these two wings as such. So this becomes a service wing with car park, kitchens, storage, pump room, etc. And this was the actual habitable wing with living, dining, and all the living areas. The other interesting thing about this brief for us was that the client didn't want any bedrooms at all. So this is the only house we've done with no bedrooms. It's all free-flowing space. Though one space is cordoned off with some sliding folding doors. But other than that, it's all free-flowing areas, and it's really only the toilets which have 4 walls around them. So for us, the heart of the house became the semi-built portion of it, and not really the built portion of it. So it's these huge verandas. This is almost a 20 feet deep veranda, and it's about 10 feet deep on the other two sides, and this U-shaped veranda that wraps around the house and protects the house in that sense, because it's also a wonderful climatic device. These are the upper floors. These are some of the sections. We built it out of earth. We had very simple material selection for this. This is an in-process image. It's the entire house is with mud plaster and country tiles and stone steps. So we also had a water body. With the way we placed our house, as you might remember, was at the end of the site and it was at the end of the slope, at the bottommost portion of the slope. So to protect the house in that sense, we had this largish water collection area, and from this, the water gets treated and we can either use it or put it back into the bow well. So it's a completely self-sufficient in that sense. Apologies for the pics. These are not professionally taken. The project isn't complete yet. And all the landscape, etc., has to be filled in. So, in terms of an interiors, as I said, there are no rooms here at all, except there's a storeroom and there are toilets. In terms of a material palette, it was very simple pitched roof, but we chose to build it out of timber completely, with country tiles on top of that. We went in for very simple cement oxide flooring, exposed concrete beams. So there's almost no second layer of covering to this at all, except the mud plaster. This is on the first floor, looking into what would be a living area. We had these wonderful craftsmen who came in from North Karnataka to build this staircase for us. It's a completely solid wood staircase. There's no steel involved anywhere. Our toilets have courtyards as well. Very simple toilets. No tiles used anywhere in this house. And we'll end with our smallest kind of a project. It was a small interior project for a children's boutique, and we had this was in Koromangala, actually, in a fairly busy kind of an area, and there were three distinct kind of areas which we had to functions that we had to accommodate. So one was the retail area for the children's clothes. There was a children's play area, kind of a jungle gym. And at the back, there were these activity rooms which could happen for various parties or other children's kind of activities. So what we did was we placed the jungle gym centrally, visible from the entry, but as well as the retail area, since it's a revenue-adding component of the program. The retail area was placed naturally so that it receives maximum frontage from the busy road, and the activity area was pushed to the back so that it least disturbs the other zones. The multi-purpose activity has a movable partition so that it can accommodate events of varying scales. Since it was for kids, we didn't want to talk down to the kids, and we made a decision early on to eschew the use of bright colors one would normally associate with a children's store, and instead create the desired liveliness with light and shade patterns and natural textures playing off each other. The intent was to create a backdrop for the children's clothes and accessories, and which doesn't compete with the bright objects, the bright clothes, but it's in its own way contributes to the ambience. The emphasis here, we've used natural materials again for their textural quantities, and to contrast the rough, untextured textures of brick and concrete with the smooth surfaces of glass and wood. We've used mostly rubber wood in this. Almost the entire thing we've done it in rubber wood. And the other interesting thing that we did was we were a little bothered about the jungle gym, because it's these really loud equipment that you get in there with this very garish red, yellow kind of equipment there. And what we then did was we developed this louver system to hide that in a way, but still expose it, because through these louvers you could still see splashes of bright color, but at the same time it doesn't overpower the ambience of the retail portion of it. The concrete slab was just left the way it is. This is a shot of the entry. It's very simple white and rubber wood that we've used almost everywhere, with some wooden flooring that we've done. This is the louver system that I spoke about, which gets mounted onto this wooden glass partition, behind which we have the jungle gym. So we've exposed all surfaces, we've electrical wiring, the air conditioning, all of that is exposed, and it contrasts quite nicely with the more finished wood surfaces and glass surfaces. So that really brings us to the end of our very small presentation. It would be amiss of me to not mention all the people we collaborate with, both in the office and outside the office. And these are just some of the people who have contributed to building whatever we have. Thank you.
Amazing work, Anand. Really clean lines, expression of material is quite powerful. Quality of space are amazing in terms of, especially the courtyards, the way you intermingle, the way you interact with the outside and the inside is quite powerful. And
Thank you. Thank you.
the language is very, very, very powerful. Especially, I really love the way the roof kind of floats on that structure, the ongoing project house you showed.
Mhm.
The roof just floats on that double height space. And you have just that steel column just sitting softly holding that edge. Beautifully, beautifully detailed out.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I shall end the session at the moment.
Thank you.